Hi, everyone. Welcome to Pediatric Grand Rounds. Very excited about our topic today on mentorship, which is such an important topic for all of us. And I'm going to turn it over to our Vice Chair for Medical Education, Sandrain Van Schaik, to get us started. Sandrain.
Hi there, welcome everybody, and welcome to this special Grand Rounds in honor of, I think it's national, maybe even international or global, I don't totally know, Mentoring Month. And it's especially nice to do this because it's, I think, a first, at least a first in a long time that our department spent some specific time to mentoring with a dedicated Grand Rounds. And this Grand Rounds is brought to you by Drs. Elizabeth Roger and Dr. Laura Rubinos. I think you all know Liz Rogers as one of our neonatologists. She's an associate professor and director of the Roots Small Baby Program in our neonatology division and serves as the associate vice chair for faculty development and chief experience officer for our department. And then Laura might not be known to everyone because she's a little bit more new on our faculty. She's an assistant professor in neonatology at ZSFGH and one of the associate program director for the residency program focused on mentorship and development of a mentorship program for the fellowship, for the residencies. Dr. Rubinos completed her pediatric residency at Texas Children's Hospital and her neonatal perinatal medicine fellowship at CHOP. She's originally from Mexico City and a first-generation college graduate with an interest in supporting pipeline programs to recruit and retain underrepresented medicine healthcare providers in academia. And without further ado, I'm handing it over to my colleagues, Dr. Rogers and Rubinos.
Thank you, Sandrine, for that introduction. Liz and I are truly honored to be here today. Next slide, please. None of the speakers today have any disclosures. Next slide, please. So during our session today, we have a fantastic lineup of panelists who will touch on all of these learning objectives as they share their own experience on mentorship. Next slide, please. But before I introduce our guest speakers, I do want to take just a couple of minutes to set the stage for mentorship. So one of the most fundamental questions that often arises for many of us in academia is, why have a mentor? While most of us have had formal and informal mentors at some point in our professional careers, there are many of us, including myself, whose previous experience with mentorship was not necessarily a positive one. In fact, for many, mentorship may feel like a huge time commitment, and the thought of those potentially awkward conversations may make mentorship feel like it's not truly worth pursuing. However, the short answer to all of those challenges and thoughts around mentorship is that yes, it is absolutely worth pursuing. And I think after our panel discussion today, you'll see the huge benefits of how a right mentor or the right set of mentors can actually be life-changing. A positive mentoring relationship should be reciprocal and mutually beneficial. For those receiving mentorships, often termed mentees, mentors can serve a critical role in providing career guidance, facilitating professional networks, and improving self-efficacy and productivity. For those providing mentorship, or the mentor, an increase in career satisfaction is often cited as the main motivator, although there are certainly additional benefits such as recognition and awards, especially as they relate to academic promotion, as well as being able to build a legacy and passing on the torch, so to speak. Next. I do want to emphasize, however, that although the importance and the benefits of mentorship are for the individual are extensive, the importance in developing academicians at an institutional level is equally as important. Taken from the literature, lack of mentorship is reported as the primary obstacle in pursuing a career in academic medicine for many residents. And we know that only 9% of physicians choose to stay in academic medicine, according to a study published in 2012. Whether or not that figure reflects the current numbers at our institution, the bottom line is that we know that the leaky pipeline in academia persists. And while there are many factors that contribute to that, a lack of mentorship is certainly an important one, as reflected in that second quote that you see here. Academic centers who pride themselves on training the next generation of leaders in medicine must recognize that the need not just to recruit, but to actually invest in formal mentorship programs that foster inclusivity and professional growth so that the very individuals we are recruiting and training can feel valued and supported. So this is particularly true for individuals in our underrepresented in medicine groups. Next slide, please. To break down the mentorship relationship a little further, an article that our own Dr. Mitch Feldman authored recently gives us an idea about the qualities of outstanding mentors. We know that the best mentors are those who exhibit admirable personal qualities such as enthusiasm, compassion, and selflessness in their everyday interactions. We know that they're able to act as career guides, offering a vision, but purposefully tailoring support to each mentee's unique needs. They make strong time commitments where they schedule regular, frequent, and high quality meetings. They support healthy personal and professional balance, and they leave a legacy of how to be a good mentor by providing role modeling and setting expectations. Next slide. In terms of individuals receiving mentorship, taking ownership in form of a mentee-driven relationship often seems to work best. And you see here that mentees who have agency in selecting their own primary relationships, who recognize that one mentor, a one-size-fits-all mentor is often not going to meet all needs, and who also respects time commitments from their mentors are the ones that have the most successful mentoring relationships. And if they're able to identify their needs clearly, set agendas, and be open to accepting input and honest feedback are essential qualities to being a mentee as well. Next slide, please. So what can a mentoring relationship look like? For many people, as we put all of this together, we know that there's no one-size-fits-all mentor, and there are many different types of mentors. While some mentors will fill a very clearly identified needs, there are other mentors who will be there to elevate, celebrate, and believe in us before we can even believe in ourselves. And so as we were putting this talk together, Liz shared this article with me, and if you could please click. That beautifully encapsulates the power of mentorship. And this is a theme that will hopefully resonate with you as we turn to our panel discussion. So without any further delay, it is my great pleasure to now introduce our first mentor dyad. Dr. Jeff Feynman, next slide, please, thank you. Dr. Jeff Feynman received his medical degree from NYU, where he also completed pediatric residency and his chief residency. He completed his critical care fellowship at UCSF and is currently a professor and vice chair of pediatrics here. His various leadership roles within UCSF include being a director of the critical care medicine program and an investigator of the Cardiovascular Research Institute, where he is also the director of the Pediatric Translational Research Core Facility. As many of you know, relevant to this talk, Dr. Feynman is a recent recipient of the Lifetime Achievement in Mentoring Award. And then I would also like to introduce Dr. Efrat Lalkish, who is a pediatrician here at UCSF. She completed her pediatric critical care fellowship at UCSF and a hospice and palliative care medicine fellowship at the University of Washington. She is also trained in pediatric bioethics through the Mercy Children's Certificate Program. Dr. Lalkish is honored to be the pediatric director of GME Wellbeing here at UCSF through the Benioff Children's Hospital in San Francisco. So welcome, Jeffrey and Efrat.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So to get started, I had a couple of questions, starting with a question for you, Jeff. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey in becoming a mentor? Was this something that you intentionally sought out and thought to yourself, I'm going to make being a good mentor one of my professional goals this year, or did it happen more organically? Can you share a little bit about that journey with us, please?
Well, until Sandrine put me up for that mentorship award this past year, I didn't really, consciously think of myself as actively mentoring. So I guess the answer would be that for me it was it's kind of been an organic process, and I think as I've gotten into a position where I can provide advice and career guidance, et cetera, that it's become much more of an important aspect of my career as I've grown.
And so when you think back about your role as being a mentor, what has it meant to you?
Well, I think, a lot of it for me is giving back. I mean, I too was first in my family to graduate college, and I didn't really know anything about academic medicine. I went through very clinically heavy training programs, and then I came to UCSF, where I was just given this opportunity. I was given this opportunity by Dr. Rudolph and the whole CVRI at the time to learn about research and learn about being a physician scientist. And I learned very early on by people like Dr. Rudolph and Dr. Hallgood gave me the opportunity to do a clinical trial, and Michael Mathey, these great mentors that really gave me the time and effort to advance my careers and teach me things and selflessly. And that was kind of the foundation for me. So it's kind of, for me, it's somewhat giving back, because people have really, at UCSF in particular, have really been so supportive in my career without any particular gain for themselves.
Thank you. And so turning to Efrat, Efrat, when you started your training at UCSF, how did you go about actually identifying a mentor and start building that mentorship relationship?
So I came to UCSF 12 years ago for my critical care fellowship, and I came kind of with guns a-blazing, just determined to be a physician scientist. And I came in with a very specific idea of who my mentor was going to be, and I aligned my mentor with being a PI. And I knew that I wanted to find someone who's going to have enough time to spend with me and to really help me build my career as a physician scientist. So that was my view of what the mentorship relationship that I would have would be in the future. And I think how it turned out in my career, but just in general, how it turns out oftentimes with mentorship, it was quite different. I came in wanting to study lung injury. And so the natural person for me to turn to was the person that Jeff turned to and worked with for a long time, Michael Mathey. But he is kind of at the period of his career that he didn't have enough time to mentor a young physician scientist in the way that I could succeed, and help find me a PI, and still has remained a support. But I turned to Jeff at that time, and this was even before I started my fellowship. I was still a resident at the time outside of this institution. And I turned to Jeff and I said to him, it doesn't seem like it's going to work out to be in Michael's lab for good reason. Maybe I can be in your lab. And Jeff very clearly said, we'll see. And I learned later on that was kind of his way of saying, it doesn't necessarily think that's going to be the best fit for a lot of reasons. But I think with that conversation, and it was a very simple conversation, in retrospect, that was the beginning of our mentorship relationship prior to even starting. Just the knowledge that he was a person that was going to help guide me to find what was the right fit for me.
Great. And, Efrat, you kind of alluded to this, but Jeff, I'm curious from your perspective, how, in your various roles that you serve, how did you sort of keep that balance going where you were able to bring yourself into, but also keep yourself out of different mentoring relationships?
Well, I haven't always done it perfectly, to be quite frank with you. I think the mentoring, what is the goal? What's a successful mentorship? Is it that, it depends how you define it, right? I like to define it, and I think that's why picking Efrat is an interesting example. Is the way I define it is that they end up being happy with their career path, with their work-life balance, etc. And that what makes them happy may change over time. And for Efrat, it has changed over time. And so sometimes what is going to make them happy and have a successful career really aligns well with some of the things that I'm doing, whether it's, writing a training grant or what our divisional needs may be. But other times it's not, and you really have to let go of that. I mean, to me, what the mentor gets out of it shouldn't be, oh, this is great because she's going to get another grant. It's going to look really good on her training grant, et cetera, or a division, but it's just the sense of pride and goodwill that you feel that you helped someone and that they're now content and thriving in their career, regardless of what that career is. To me, that's, I used to say that this was, a good mentor had to be in a selfless position, because, and in many ways that's true in the sense that if they're going to your lab, you don't want to be in a situation where you need them to generate data to keep your grants going, et cetera. But the reality is, as you mentioned, it's very reciprocal, this relationship. And oftentimes I think the mentor gets much more out of it than the mentee, because the sense of, as we say in Yiddish, the sense of nachas, the sense of pride that you get from seeing them achieve their goals, whatever their goals are. If you can somehow feel like maybe you help them in any little way, that's tremendous satisfaction. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Yes, it did. Thank you. And actually, that's a perfect segue into my next question for Efrat, which is that, as many of us navigate this journey in academia and realize that sometimes our personal, professional situation or goals change, there's always that balance of our service to the organization and caring for ourselves and being true to ourselves. And so how did your relationship with Jeff, Efrat, sort of play into that, that journey for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's why I have a box of tissues next to me, which I already got a little emotional, Laura, when you were just presenting and introducing. But I think for me, I think a lot of us in medicine come in a place of worrying about disappointing and worrying about what we owe other people, and certainly having a feeling like we don't deserve to be here, and feeling like we just are lucky and we should just do everything that we possibly can for the organization, for the department, for the division. And many years ago, when I was deciding what to do next with life, I was really having a very, very hard time, and I was not willing to share it because I was afraid in a lot of ways of disappointing and of disappointing Jeff, disappointing a lot of people, but also disappointing Jeff because he has put so much in me and I have given him so many gray hairs. But I at one point, when I recognized how much I had kind of fallen apart, I called up Jeff and I said, Jeff, I figured out what's going on. And it was right before I went to Seattle for a year to do my palliative care fellowship. And I said, Jeff, I figured out what's wrong with me. I'm going to spend a year. I'm going to get better for the division. I'm going to do it. I'm going to come back and I'm going to be okay for the division. And Jeff said, no. He said, no, you have to get better for yourself. And he said those words, and I went away for a year and I got better when I came back. And he also reached out when I was gone for that year and asked me to come back. And those conversations really, and his seeing me as not this person that owes him something, but seeing me as a person that he cared about, that he views a lot of us, and he has a lot of mentees. Jeff is someone who has mentees all over the world. And here at this institution, I know that so many of us really value our relationship with Jeff so much. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we talk every day for hours or even every week for a long time, but just knowing that he's there and that he supports us. And as you mentioned in your introduction, Laura, that he sees us as something that we don't even see ourselves as. He sees us as special. That for me is this relationship that Jeff has really allowed me to figure out what I want to do and how I want to do it, and has seen me for a long time as an academician, even if I didn't, and has believed in me in a way that I haven't. And I think that belief and that continued to slowly kind of push me really gently, but with kindness. Ooh, my lights went out. I think that's what's allowed me to be where I am in my career. And I just cannot thank Jeff enough.
Thank you.
I disagree, but you're giving me credit there.
Not one bit.
Yes, and I think that, on a personal level, that resonates so much with many of us that are that are in the midst of this journey. And so, Jeff, how did that particular experience with Efrat and with other mentoring relationships that you've had with other individuals help you think about the sort of the evolution of your role as a mentor, and how do you usually approach that when you start off and thinking that your mentee is heading out in one direction, and then they change along the way? Or how do you usually approach that?
There's no great formula for that. I think you just have to keep being aware that we just want to try to be insightful as to what they really want, and not what I really want, or what the division really wants, or what the department really wants. And you just have to keep evaluating that and making sure that you're true to that, and that you're trying to just help the mentee do their best for them, and their satisfaction, their career happiness, their life happiness, etc. It's a constant reminder, because you can get mixed up in secondary gains, other than just feeling good for them, and you just have to. I think Efrat's words. She's said that before, and I've heard that before, and I think that's really important for older folks like myself to remember this, because we don't think about it very much, but this concern that they're going to disappoint us is really, I think, true, because many people have said that, and I have to keep reminding myself of that, to be sensitive of that, and try to relieve them of that concern, because even though there's nothing that any of us feel like we're doing to create that, it's there, inherently there, and it's powerful. And so I think it's important for me to hear that again today, because I think I have to keep reminding myself as a mentor to be aware of that, and make sure you relieve people of that burden.
Absolutely, I agree. I think that can't be stated enough on both ends. And then, Efrat, just to close this out, I'm curious what lessons you have learned from your mentoring relationship with Jeff that now you've put into practice in your own role as a mentor to others.
Yeah, I think I've learned a lot. I think one is the importance of a personal connection, and the importance of humor and lightness in it. And Jeff and I certainly have that. But it's also respect, and it's just trust. And there's a gentleness to my relationship with Jeff, with, again, not having expectations, not having a secondary gain, but really just loving on my mentees, and thinking of my mentees as people who I just want to see thrive, whatever that means, both here and outside of here, and just having that sense that they are incredible people, and to give them that sense that I get from Jeff all the time. I remember it was my 30th birthday when I was in a first year fellow, about to be a second year fellow, and Jeff and I were on call together, and Jeff was telling the story of when he turned 30, when he was on call. And he had no idea that he had turned 30. And it was only after he had been in the hospital for a few days, and he went home and he heard the message from his mom that he remembered that he turned 30. And that night, when I was in the 7th floor CICU in the old hospital, Jeff just turned to me and said, "You're special." And that's the way that he's always made me feel. And that's what I try to impart upon my mentees.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I think this is incredibly insightful for many of us. Liz, I do want to turn it over to you so that we can transition to our second dyad.
Thanks so much, Laura, and thanks, Efrat and Jeff, for being vulnerable with us too. And I think as we all negotiate these relationships, It's my great personal pleasure to be able to introduce our next dyad, beginning with one of my great mentors, Dr. Alma Martinez. Alma started medical school here at UCSF, took a couple detours via Oakland and Harbor UCLA, and her clinical work is based in neonatology at San Francisco General Hospital, as many of you know. And she also really importantly serves as the director of outreach for the School of Medicine and the director of diversity for our Department of Pediatrics. And directs a very successful UCSF post-bac program for low-income or disadvantaged students who are interested in medicine. And in this role has just mentored numerous underrepresented in medicine and low-income students who've successfully matriculated to schools, and she's really proud of that. Additionally, I'm so thrilled to welcome Dr. Maggie Montoya, who's one of our third-year pediatric residents here at UCSF. Maggie was born in Chicago and is the first in her family to pursue a career in medicine. She brings passion about supporting UIM residents and medical students through increased mentorship opportunities. So it's lovely to welcome you both.
Thanks for having us. I feel like I'm on Oprah.
Yes, lay back in your chair, relax. I'm going to start with you, Maggie. We know that mentors can function in many different roles, and mentoring relationships can look very different. We'd love to learn more about your relationship with Alma, and what do those logistics look like? How often do you meet? What do you talk about?
We initially met when we first started our relationship, and we can go into, I think there's a question about how did we even get there. We initially set out to meet at least like once a month initially, and then COVID happened. So then we kind of lost that opportunity, but like we would see each other randomly, like on rotations and just like through the diversity committee, doing a lot of things like that. But initially we just tried to get to know each other, trying to see if it was a good match. And then we set like an agenda for us, so ourselves. So we were just like, well, how do you handle like a difficult conversation with somebody? How do you code switch? How do you like deal with like this imposter syndrome that seems to be just like particularly hard hitting for UIMs? And then just like, how do you, like, Alma, how did you get to where you were? Basically, like, how can I be like you? How can I carve a position for myself as like UI, like a Latina female? Like, how did you do that? Like, how did you become who you are, Alma? Because who doesn't want to be like Alma? But that was basically, that was the logistical part of it. But then it became less and less structured as we became like friendlier and like buddies.
Thanks, Maggie. Alma, what do you sort of value most in your mentoring relationship with Maggie?
I think you can tell some of that already. I think Maggie has an incredible amount of energy and enthusiasm about medicine. And that is palpable. And I love being around people that have that energy, because I forget that part, you know, that sort of excitement about everything in medicine. And it's a good reminder. But I think beyond that, I've also enjoyed really thinking about what it means to be a mentor, and how do I improve and increase my skills about mentoring. Maggie is, as many of you know, she's really an open-hearted person. She's willing to talk about all sorts of meaningful conversations on a variety of topics. She doesn't shy away from challenging conversations. And I think I've had some of my best conversations about things that impact minority physicians with Maggie. Thinking about what does it mean to have a professional identity in medicine, when those definitions were not meant initially to include minority physicians. So how do minority physicians develop a professional identity? How do you handle imposter syndrome, or actually I've come across a new term recently, and it's called rightful presence in medicine, which I love, because all of us can think about how do we develop this rightful presence in medicine? How do we feel like we are here because we belong here? And having those kinds of conversations have been eye-opening for me. Maggie's also taught me a lot about what it's like now to be a resident, a UIM resident at UCSF. What are those challenges? And how do these residents derive support from each other or from faculty people in our department? And I think because I am a pediatrician, I love watching developmental processes. And so I've really enjoyed watching Maggie develop certain leadership skills, first for the diversity committee. And then when she joined the anti-racist task force, where she really had, I think, spearheaded big chunks of the sections on what residents and trainees need for support in our department. So it's funny because I was watching your grand rounds and thinking about your comments at the beginning, Laura, when you were talking about the mentor also receives and learns from the mentee. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, that is so true. Oh my God, I should have read that article before today. It absolutely is true that I have learned from Maggie and I've learned from my other mentees. And that's, I think, been very rewarding.
Thanks so much. And Maggie, I think you've both alluded to this, but how does your shared sort of cultural identity with Alma, how has that helped you navigate as you've experienced, the potential for racism, microaggressions, this idea of professional identity that, stereotype threat that we talk about in healthcare and particularly in training? Was that important to you that you find a mentor who had a shared cultural identity as a woman of color, or was that an added bonus of finding Alma?
Anyone who wants to hear the story can message me and we can email and chit chat. But that is something that was really important and I found in Alma. And honestly, having her, having a shared identity and seeing where she is in her career and in life as a human, it's validating, right? So just for practical purposes, I didn't know what a mentor was. I didn't know how to get a mentor. I think that, first generation, almost everything, you're just kind of how do I do this? And just kind of following what other people are doing around you. So first it was go to college, get a job. And then I got there and now I'm now what, And then I see other people applying to med school. So I'm just maybe I'll do that. And then I did it. And then in med school, I had a lot of my classmates. They were oh yeah, I have a mentor of this because I want to go into this. And I have an idea that this is what the research that I want to pursue. So I'm going to make the chief of whatever my mentor. And so for me, that was oh, mentors are for people who are going somewhere, have a direction, mentors are for people who are going to do special things. And it didn't quite click that could be me too. And so I didn't actively go out and seek one besides we would have career development where it's just here's how you find a mentor. And so I would email random people that I'm they might be cool and be hey, you want to be my mentor? And they're sure. And then nothing happened. I'm why is everybody so hyped up about a mentor? If literally nothing happens, what's going on? And so then I found that I was doing it wrong. But then I found Alma and the way that we found each other was interesting. And I kind of was struggling, and I'll be quite honest, because Alma said I'm open, and I think that's kind way of saying I can't shut up about anything. But basically, so I was struggling with my how I fit in the field of medicine and at UCSF. And I was having a really, really hard time just figuring out my place. And so I just randomly emailed Alma. I was hey, sup, you want to be my mentor? And she's yeah, okay. And then we kind of set an agenda for ourselves in terms of what do we want to get out of this? And I wanted to get how do I establish myself? How do I, function in this place that wasn't meant for people like me? And it's been so validating because a lot of the times when I was just like, you know what, like something's wrong with me. Like I don't fit in because of all these things that are wrong with me. And then having Alma be like, no, that's messed up. Or like, oh no, like you're not crazy for thinking this. No, that shouldn't have happened that way. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm not crazy. Like this place just needs to do better in terms of DEI. And that was like, she's literally changed my life. Like we don't talk every day, but just like, she's one of the reasons that I'm like still in medicine and still like excited to pursue like academic medicine and still excited for like the career that whatever career I'm going to go on. Somebody please hire me. And so like she's literally the reason, because she's validated my experience in general.
That's amazing to hear. I'm sure, Alma, that must, be really powerful to hear. And I want to turn it around a little bit to you, Alma, because I think we've heard from Maggie the critical nature of having this shared identity. And yet, as we have more and more, gratefully, UIM trainees and junior faculty, it's a challenge to offer mentorship when only 6% of our faculty at UCSF identify as Hispanic or Latinx, 3% identify as Black or African American, less than 1% identify as Indigenous. And so we know that a lot of UIM faculty are already taxed with so many other requests and responsibilities, which then limits UIM mentors. So what recommendations do you have for non-UIM faculty in understanding and really being able to support the unique needs of our UIM trainees and junior faculty?
Yeah, this is at the bulk of what it means to mentor across differences, I think. Thanks for bringing up the minority tax also, Liz, because this is something that Maggie and I talked about a lot as well at the beginning. And I felt that Maggie was embarrassed about the tax, felt bad about asking me to be her mentor because of a tax. And for people who don't or are not familiar with this minority tax, it comes to, it's defined as UIM faculty and trainees are often taxed, quote unquote, with extra responsibilities when it comes to issues around diversity and equity and inclusion. And these extra responsibilities are not uniformly paid for or even appreciated. And so it is in the literature, you can look this up on PubMed, the minority tax, and read about it. And so there is such a thing as a minority tax. And I think at the end of the day, I told Maggie that regardless, this is something I wanted to do, and that it was my choice to do this. And so that was at the start of our relationship. And in truth, because there are so small numbers of UIM faculty, we are going to have to learn how to be mentors across differences, so that non-UIM faculty should not shy away from this. And just like anything in medicine, you can become better at it by reading about it, about educating yourself about it, and then by practicing. What is it? See one, do one, teach one, or something along that. There's all sorts of literature out there about mentorship. Laura, I think, brought some really important points up at the beginning. There's less literature about mentoring across differences, but there still are out there. And I think the one thing it does require is that faculty just be willing to do this, and to educate yourself about what is different in the experiences that UIM students and trainees have and faculty have. What is it that is on their mind about fitting into this reality? What is it that I can help with? So don't shy away from having those difficult conversations. I think this previous year, living in this country, we have learned to stare at some of these difficult conversations in the face, and to have really important, really challenging conversations with our neighbors, with our friends, with people that we've worked with, that we've never had before. Liz, you and I were on the 28-day or 21-day challenge. I can't even remember. It feels like so long ago. But those conversations, we would never have had those conversations 5 years ago. And I think that we are all learning that it's okay to do this, and that it's actually wrong not to do this. It's wrong to assume that, oh, we live in a very colorblind society, or in the Bay Area, there is no racism or sexism or anti-gay feelings, or none of that happens here because we are the enlightened ones, and we know that that's not the case, right? And it's the onus is upon us as faculty to learn about what people are talking about. So I mentioned rightful presence in medicine. We've talked about imposter syndrome. I mentioned to Liz Rogers earlier this week that I was feeling a little imposter syndrome being on this panel of supposedly enlightened mentors. I certainly don't feel that way often in my career. We've got to talk about issues that impact our minority, underrepresented trainees, or other intersectional areas that our trainees come in with. We have to talk about privilege and racism and microaggressions and code switching. And then the other thing I would say for mentors is to remind your mentees that not one person supplies you with everything you need, so that you may go to person X to get mentorship around clinical performance. You might go to person Y to learn about research opportunities and how to be, get involved in this lab and how to go from there. And you might then go to other groups, other people that where you can discuss your personal identity with others in safe spaces. So, you're not alone in doing this mentorship.
And I think it really speaks to what we've talked about, which is a mentorship team. No one person can be all of these things for everyone. And, Maggie, you've already, as a trainee, as a resident, already accomplished so much in terms of how you've conceptualized, mentorship needs of your co-residents and proposing a mentorship model for the anti-racism task force in the department. What's your vision for what an inclusive and supportive mentoring relationship for UIM residents looks like?
I think it depends on the dyad, right? It's very, very specific. Not all, and I can only speak to my experience. So I don't think I speak for all the UIMs, and some people may not need the kind of support that I found that I needed. So I think it's very mentor-mentee dependent. But I think practical steps to finding mentors and what a mentor can do for you is super, super useful. I still don't have it quite. I think just me and Alma just kind of found each other almost. But I forgot the question. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
It's sort of your vision for how we can best support our UIM residents specifically.
Oh, I think the structured mentorship program that we proposed and that we had presented with the anti-racism task force, I think that has a lot of information. So stay tuned.
Wonderful. I think at this point, we would love to invite Efrat and Jeff, Laura, to turn your videos on to join us in a bit of a conversation amongst all of us. And I'll just start with a question that all four of you can really answer and take a quick second and answer, which is, one of the barriers we hear about all the time is time. mentorship takes time. It was even in Laura's first slide. And that commitment feels time. And I think when someone asks you to be a mentor, all you think about then is how much time, and do I have that time? Can I do it? So I was wondering if you could each speak to that component of, is it a barrier? Is time really a barrier? And how can we make the most of maybe a little bit less time, or help with the efficiency maybe of our relationships, so that people don't shy away from being a mentor because of it? Don't all jump in.
I can start. I mean, I don't think there's any formula for making it efficient, et cetera. It really just, it depends on the mentor and mentee, and some require more time and attention, and other relationships don't. I think it's just a matter of priority, and you always have time for your priorities. So if mentoring someone is a priority, or mentoring in general is a priority, then you'll have the time for it. I think it's people who are going into this mentorship role, just if they don't know already, they just they'll learn with time how terrific it is. I mean, it's just so rewarding, and if they appreciate that, then you'll be surprised that you find the time for it. Yeah.
I also found that having the concept that I ask the mentee to tell me what they want helps me a lot. So I don't have to be like, oh my God, I'm having a meeting. What am I going to talk about? But rather have the mentee tell me what they need. The mentee can send me an agenda. This is for our next meeting. I want to talk about 1, 2, 3. And they can even send me, an assignment. And that then makes it so that, oh, this is what we're talking about tonight. And it feels a little bit more doable. And it also means that the mentee is getting what they want out of this relationship. And I don't have to try to guess what it is that they need. And I think as you get better and better at more into this relationship, you might then start seeing what they might need. But I find it, if I have the mentee do some of the legwork like that, it helps me get myself organized. It gives me a smaller thing to organize. I feel it's much more doable.
That's a great point, Alma. I'm going to learn from that. That's the difference between a neonatologist and an ICU doctor, where you're so much more organized than me.
Okay.
I do want to just take us back to the Q&A. Maggie, specifically, you got a shout out from the SFN workroom saying you rock in all caps. And also with a question of how do you suggest balancing a mutually beneficial mentorship relationship with the madness of residency, where the months sometimes just fly by?
Short answer, I don't know. Still figuring it out. I think when I started my mentorship relationship with Alma, my schedule just kind of worked out where we could like bond pretty significantly, and we had the time to do that. But I don't know, because we're guilty of it, as much as I'm obsessed with her, like I can't like reach out to her all the time because like it's hard. Like I'm a resident, she's on call, and it's really hard to find that time. So I don't know. I don't have a really good one, but I think quality over quantity is going to be the best. I know that Alma and I have met in person, like maybe like, I don't know, formally for this like mentorship relationship, maybe like 5 times tops, but every time we've ever met, it's been really, really good. And so again, like what I needed from the relationship was just kind of like validation that like I belong here, and that I'm not crazy, I'm not going crazy, and that there's hope and it gets better. And I got that from Alma. And I'm continuing to work with her in terms of like my career development, my like identity formation. But I got like the biggest portion of what I needed like early on. So I hope that makes sense.
I also, a practical point, I also try to schedule things around meals, because that's a good sort of bonding kind of experience, sit down, eat, enjoy a meal. And it's also something you have to do anyway. And so it kind of, although, hospital cafeteria dinners, we've had those at Mission Bay. We've eaten in little restaurants. So it's a variety of things, but meals, I think, helps too.
We're getting more comments in the chat from the quintessential mentor in Colin Partridge. And I know so many of us throughout the institution have learned from him throughout his many years affiliated with UCSF, Alma and myself included. And I think, he's really bringing up this team approach as being so critical. So I guess I'll ask Efrat, maybe expand on it. Have you, how do you look at can you have a team that's too big, or are you always looking to add mentors?
It's a really good question. For me, I have interests in a lot of different fields. And I found that I've just collected a whole sea of mentors, which for me has been incredibly helpful. And in each mentorship relationship is really different. So with some of my mentors, I meet every other week, and we have for years and just talked about certain topics and with an agenda or without an agenda. With some of my mentors like Jeff, it's much less formal, and I'll reach out when I'm in desperate need for help, or we'll run into each other, but it's not much more defined than that, than when it comes up. And for me, those kinds of relationships and the fluidity and the kinds of mentorship relationships is really important, but truly having a team of people that's there supporting and excited about what I want to do. And sometimes they're not all excited, but at least one of them will be excited. And for me, that's a really helpful way to go through and to know that there's an entire group of people out there just kind of rooting for me. That's been a slow progression. And it's been an evolution as I progressed in my career as to what mentorship means. And certainly as I've gotten to no longer be so young, it's helpful to have people who have been through different phases of the career as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that also is developing mentorship skills. And I think many of us sort of find ourselves in that position without having had much formal training, or at least we don't feel like we've had enough training around mentorship. So I'd be curious from the group if you could share how you have sought out any additional mentorship skill building, or how you've gone about doing that.
Yeah, I've signed up for so many numerous faculty development sessions. The AAMC sometimes has sessions on mentorship, but I've also learned from people that I've worked with who have been incredible mentors, and I have learned their mentorship skills watching it as they've used it on me, and I've learned from that experience as well. But I certainly do sign up for development courses. In fact, I'm curious about Sandrine's that's coming up in February. It's unfortunately on a week that I'm on service, so I'll have to try to get the second time you do it. But yeah, totally. Learn, read, and then model, copy.
Yeah, I would say that my education has been, I mean, I've read a bit, but it's been predominantly the latter. It's been more observing mentors of mine who I have tremendous respect for, and trying to model them and copy them, and also they didn't have to be mentors of mine now. Now we have many colleagues that mentor other people, and I observe and watch, and could always learn how to do things better by listening to our colleagues and friends that are mentors like today. So that's where I get most of it. I do try to do some formal education, but for me, it's been more of an organic, informal process.
Yeah, I similarly have had some educational courses, and I think that the more I take, the better. And it's not just specifically on mentorship, but it's also on things like caring for the caregiver and peer support, and just learning from those modalities and learning from my colleagues and from my mentors. But the other place that I've learned the most, I think, is from the mentees themselves, and just kind of being open to what's needed and learning to evolve my role as a mentor based on what the needs have been, and bringing that forth with the next mentorship relationship.
Yeah, and surprise, like now I'm a mentor. So I have yeah, I know, Marita and Araceli. So I have one who is in medical school and applying for pediatric residency, and she loves this UCSF. But anyways, and then my other one is a college student who wants to go into med school, and like, it's just, I've never had a course, and I'm just kind of asking them, like, what do you need from me? Like, I can show you my experience, but what do you need from me? Like, what would be helpful? And just setting that very, very early on, and having the transparency and being like, hey, you know, like, this is going to be a process between the both of us, and like, you let me know what you need. If something's not working for you, you tell me. Like, that there's not going to be a hard feelings. I'm not going to drop you because you hurt my feelings. You know, so that having that conversation early on is, I think, important, has been successful for my two mentees.
Yeah,
I think it's just so important to think about, you know, when you're an intern and you think, what am I possibly going to teach this medical student on my service? I don't know anything yet. And then you realize you do know, and you go through this process of, you know, nothing is sort of too small to teach people. And when you center it on what they are asking of you, then, you know, you'll fly together. So I think that's so great. And there've been some shout outs in the chat as well. Ucsf Tershani shouted out his mentorship by Meg McNamara a decade ago, and now he's a faculty member. Really calling out this idea of, like any relationship, you get out what you put in. And I think that goes really both ways, from the mentor and the mentee. So we're so grateful to the four of you for kind of making yourselves vulnerable and engaging in this conversation with us today, and sort of both getting at the heart and the head, some of the concrete things. And so I think we'll pull up the slides, Charisse, to close out. We hope that you've taken from this some lessons. This again was a paper that was done with Mitch Feldman and his group at UCSF, trying to really study successful relationships in mentoring, and those were really hallmarked by reciprocity, as we've touched on today, mutual respect, clear expectations, personal connection, and shared values. And relationships that were defined as sort of unsuccessful usually resulted from poor communication, lack of commitment, some conflict of interest that we have to keep in mind, and competition even. And then the mentor's lack of experience. So I think we also want to highlight that you may not get the ideal mentor on the first try, and that's okay. There is a team of people out there, and you will find them. But I think to speak to the mentor's lack of experience, we recognize that there have been gaps, and we're trying to fill those in the department. So next slide. To that end, we have some upcoming workshops, specifically in February, mentoring across differences, which I think is so critical that Alma and Maggie and Laura together today have really called attention to. And then there's a lot of talk about mentorship, sponsorship, coaching. And so we're really grateful to have Anna Chang and Andy Marmar talk us through those. So you should be seeing this in your email soon to register for these workshops. Laura and I are working together and would love to hear other ideas for future workshops, so that we really can train up a really strong cadre of mentors in the department. Next slide. And although, yes, as Sandrine mentioned, January is National Mentoring Month, we hope in the Department of Pediatrics, next slide, every month is National Mentoring Month. So we're really grateful for your time here today, and particularly for our four panelists.
Thank you.
Well, maybe I'll wrap up. I was waiting for Sandrain, but I hear silence. So I just want to, and we're at the hour, but I want to thank everybody. This was really wonderful. And it was especially valuable to hear the personal stories of the people who share their journey today. I think that always has more impact. And so thanks everybody. This was really wonderful. And of course, as Liz pointed out, this is an ongoing thing that we all need to continue to keep on our radar screen. So I'm looking forward to more conversations like this. Be well, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.